I was a middle linebacker. I played specialty teams. I was a long snapper. Started out in Texas and continued my high school playing years in Kansas. I had the opportunity to speak to a lot of Division I and Division II schools to continue my career in football. In that time, I had some great family support, and one particular person who was there for me a lot was my Uncle Bob Deaver. And Bob happened to be a full-time military person in the United States Air Force. He was a strong influence for my final decision, and that was I elected not to go into football and collegiately, and I decided to join the military.
Elements of the 82nd Airborne Division, as well as key units of the United States Air Force, are arriving today to take up defensive positions in Saudi Arabia. All United States and coalition forces will suspend offensive combat operations.
There has been a plane crash on the southern tip of Manhattan. You're looking at the World Trade Center.
At this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
There was a need, quite frankly, to get as many resources, men and women, into the counterintelligence world. And that's the main job of a special agent OSI, is to formulate relationships throughout the world so that we can detect, deter, and fight off terrorism. I developed a skill in the foreign language of Spanish that really put me to the forefront of operations in Central and South America, and my skills were used in various different operations down there. I was in Honduras, Nicaragua, Colombia, Mexico, Ecuador, Venezuela, and I had great opportunities to help. My specialty developed into hostage rescue, and at that time in Colombia, the FARC were wreaking havoc on the Colombian nationals. And in doing so, their modus of operation was to specifically take American hostages and try to obtain any type of money or assets from that capture. In 2006, when I was sent down there specifically to assist in the operation, continued efforts to secure 3 American hostages that were taken 5 years prior to 2006. My job was to make these relationships and develop relationships, gather logistics, equipment, personnel, in an effort to retrieve the 3 American hostages. In 2008, early spring, I was personally called by leadership, Defense Secretary Gates' office, to head up operations again down in Colombia to retrieve those 3 American hostages.
Tonight, we're getting our first look inside the mission, in which Colombian soldiers posed as rebels and tricked the captors into handing over the hostages. Kimberly Dozier has the latest.
It's a high-stakes ruse with dozens of lives in the balance. 15 hostages, including 3 Americans, think they're being moved again from one Colombian rebel camp to another. As they move to the waiting helicopters, they're surrounded by armed rebels. This hostage, held for a decade and a member of the Colombian army, shouts at the camera to what he thinks is a rebel film crew. In fact, he's actually holding up his own rescue.
Out of all the things I was blessed to do in the military, that was probably the biggest accomplishment, going back in and finally getting them out. I think the news and history, if you go to Google, which is very prominent, you'll see that there was a lady from French descent who was a reigning politician in Colombia who was in captivity too. There was also 15 high-profile Colombian police that were scattered amongst the different prisons that the FARC had in the jungles with these 3 Americans, that we were able to successfully, as a coalition group, Colombians, Americans, and others, to successfully develop a plan to get them out with little to no bloodshed. Because of the secrecy and because of the discreetness of the operation, it was a very quiet ceremony. A few people. There's a base in Illinois called Scott Air Force Base. Those 3 American hostages were sent there, and we privately in the group we sat around, we talked to them. I'm a stay-at-home father and husband. I'm happy to do that. I'm married to my soulmate, Angie Moyer, and I find myself doing a lot of volunteer work. I volunteer at a local butcher shop, enjoy volunteering at church, and just being very peaceful in this peaceful little town I live.